Thank you. So obviously I have a financial interest in this talk through the RScan device. This is now a FDA approved and CE marked device which can scan in any particular pattern you wish to program in a customized way with 6 degrees of freedom, and it's a high frequency ultrasound scanner. So, you all know that we can do high frequency ultrasound scans of the cornea and delineate each of the individual layers, but this talk is about what we can do behind the iris. And of course, we know that OCT images the lens very nicely as well, but it doesn't get behind the iris into the posterior chamber. And we like to think about the posterior chamber now as kind of the dark side of the moon. We kind of know it's there, we operate there, but we never know where we are because we can't image it. The repeatability of this device is extraordinary. It's very, very well engineered. Look at all of the commercially available handheld devices, the Artemis 1, which was a prototype, and now the ArcScan. In terms of angle and sulcus repeatability, it's really superb. Everyone's been talking for years about defining the zonular plane and possibly getting an ELP that improves our predictability of IOL calculations, but now that we can actually biometrize the entire lens in 3D accurately, it might be possible that this ELP position may be a little bit more predictable, because now we've got a very high precision device for measuring lens size, lens position, equatorial depth. The size of the capsule, of course, might be something important, because an IOL that is rattling around in a bag will be quite different from one that fills the bag, and certainly some that depend on a certain amount of fibrosis and not too much might perform better if we had custom sizing of haptics due to, with respect to bag size. ICL sizing, of course, is, the obvious immediate application for posterior chamber imaging, and you know that you can have it a white to white of 12 in the two eyes with a totally different lens rise. This is because if we compare, for example, the sulcus to the angle, there are eyes where these are equal. There are eyes where the sulcus is larger than the angle. There are eyes where the sulcus is smaller than the angle. There are eyes where the sulcus anatomy is different between the left and right eyes of the same patient. And of course, there are iris cysts and other things back there which lead to, all of these issues can lead to IOL rotation and lack of accuracy in toric ICL. The whole story about using the white to white to predict the sulcus diameter, well, you're going to pick the wrong lens in 38, or the less ideal lens in 38% of the eyes. If you include angle diameter, it'll be 32%. If you multivariate this and include spherical equivalent and all these other things, it only gets down to 26%. If you measure sulcus directly, the chances of picking the non-ideal ICL length goes down to 3%. And this is shown in the study that was published by the late Carlo Lovisolo, who we lost a couple of months ago, where he showed that the accuracy of the volt control goes up significantly, the predictability of the volt goes up significantly, and that half the time a different ICL would have been used if the star calculation formula had been used, compared to using sulcus sizing using his formula. And lastly, I have just one slide just to point out that as we know that epithelium changes after LASIK, we know that you get a myopic regression due to epithelial changes after myopic ablation, and you get a hyperopic shift after hyperopic ablation. And if you imagine that both these epithelial profiles are under the same keratometry, you can now understand why this 3 diopter range between these two eyes can cause huge errors in IOL calculations. So suddenly, cataract surgeons will be interested in the epithelium of the cornea, because it's the epithelial power calculations which will help us really nail IOL calculations after refractive surgery. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to tell you how exciting I think that is, because today we've been emphasizing formulas, the Olsen tube, the Holiday tube, and the Barrett tube, all now use 7 and use things like the white to white, the ACD, lens thickness, and all of those things to try to predict that effective lens position better, but there's nothing better than measuring them. And the fact is that diameter, the thickness, the zonular plane, where that inserts into the ciliary processes, we know ultimately affects the effective lens position, but we've just used geometry from outside measurements and getting a high-resolution B-scan that will allow us to actually image and measure those things, there's no doubt in my mind that it'll move us to the next level, and we'll be able to plug in actual measured values into those formulas rather than just guesses and measuring things out on the outside. So I'm very excited about this evolution of measurements, and think it will help us with all types of lens calculations.
But Jack, I think the problem is we can do this measurement. We already have the measurements post-op. We can do that at this time. So do we have any data that shows us that having that pre-op measurement of the lens affects the actual position of the lens afterwards?
Well, it might. The fact is that the actual position of the lens in the eye post-operatively is critical, and that's the ultimate position. But what I was leading up to is that the model, if you end up with those measurements pre-operatively, there may actually be a bias or an offset in there that actually is better than the actual geometry of relating those.
Anytime we move from regression formulas based on averages of prior data to actual measurements, whether it's the posterior corneal power or post-LASIK eyes, whether it's posterior corneal astigmatism or what Dan has shown us, we are going to advance the accuracy of what we do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.